It seems like luxury fashion brands can't stop exploiting workers. On the 15th of May, an Italian court placed Valentino under judicial administration for a year after discovering worker abuse in its supply chain. The court found that Valentino Bags Lab, which makes Valentino branded handbags and travel articles, subcontracted production to Chinese firms in Italy that exploited workers. And of course, as you probably expect, Valentino is denying any wrongdoing. You know, the usual spill. We had all these great checks and audits in place to make sure that everything is above board. And some of you watching may already know that the circumstances around this Valentino investigation really resembles the circumstances that we covered in the past in cases that included the likes of Dior, Armani, and Alvaro Martini. The story last year went particularly viral because in this investigation, they found out Dior paid subcontractors 53 euros per bag to assemble the bag, which would then be sold for 2,600 euros on the Dior website. Funny enough, the price is actually a lot higher now. I checked to see how much they cost. They're a lot more than 2,600 euros right now. This is something I've talked about on the channel a lot, that it tends to be the case, especially with the biggest luxury brands, that they outsource a lot of their simpler products to make because they have to be made in high volume for them to make a profit. A lot of these luxury brands are in the business of cost-cutting procedures. So any way that they can cost cuts, they will do it because that's how they improve their profit margins. And these brands feel like they can increase profit margins in perpetuity until the end of days. They'll just keep growing, right? So anything they can do to reduce costs, they'll do it. So why it makes like economic sense, obviously, for them to outsource things that are easy to make, that they can make in scale with workers that aren't that skilled. Normally in their own ateliers, in their own factories, you tend to see the things that are a lot more difficult to make, the more complex ready to wear, the complex bags, that's what they make in their own factories. So as a consumer, if you want to buy things where, you know, these European artisans have made it in Italy, you have to buy the more expensive stuff. If you're buying the entry-level products, 9 times out of 10, those are things that have been outsourced to make. 6 months ago, Al Jazeera made this amazing documentary that you should check out because it highlights a lot of this exploitation and really shows you how this exploitation takes place. It also shows in certain factories, people are making products for multiple brands at once. Just based on this, I'm very sure that very soon we're going to hear a lot more luxury brands be put into the fold and be put under fire for exploiting workers and, you know, subcontracting to these same kind of factories, because I can only imagine how many luxury brands use these kind of factories. I also did react to this documentary on Patreon. So if you're interested in that, you can subscribe to my Patreon, link in the description, and you can, you know, watch the documentary with me adding my thoughts. Back to Valentino and their extremely flawed audit system. Last year, I did a lot of coverage and a lot of explanations around exactly how these luxury fashion audit systems work. The whole system is flawed. It almost doesn't make any sense. Many of these third-party factories always passed the audits, and they weren't exposed on wrongdoing until local police got involved and carried out their own investigation. So essentially, we can't really trust anything that auditors say because auditors don't really have a lot of rights to really check anyway. So unless it's a police investigation, we wouldn't have even known these things to be true, right? Police are the people that have the jurisdiction and the legal right, if they have a warrant, to actually search the premises of a factory, to actually do deeper research. So that's why the police are always going to find things that auditors won't. Also, auditing, for a lot of people that don't know, is really down to the discretion of the brands, how stringent and how frequent the audits are going to be. In the Reuters investigation we looked at last year, we found that brands dictate the depth of their checks and the auditor's scope of action. Inspections are often also limited to direct suppliers and not to subcontractors. And this kind of makes a lot of sense to me because I feel like subcontractors, like I said earlier, they make a lot of different brands in the same factory. So I can imagine why there's restricted auditing allowed there, because they don't want a situation where brands are sort of using auditors to try and collect information about different brands or, you know, collect knowledge from different brands. So it makes a lot of sense why more stringent audits happen at the factories that are actually directly run by brands, whereas the third-party manufacturers, there are less things that auditors can really do in that case. In the Reuters investigation, we saw that as private actors, auditors cannot freely access factories or workshops outside of agreed hours and may not collect documents that are not spontaneously submitted by suppliers. The time allocated for on-site inspections is often too short to examine employees and review documents. Workers are also asked to lie about their working hours as most of them work 14 hours 6 days a week, but contractually, they're only supposed to work part-time, which would be about 4 hours a day, in line with their legal part-time contracts. On the day of audits, employees with part-time contracts are always asked to leave as soon as they finish their formal shift, but are asked to come back and continue their work after the auditors leave. I can literally go on for so long about all the different aspects of the auditing system that makes it essentially pointless, but I won't do that. But it's just, I'm saying all these facts just to illustrate when brands say, yeah, we carry out regular checks and audits to make sure that everything is above board, just take it with a grain of salt. Don't even take them seriously, because we know that auditors basically have no rights. The only people that can really investigate something properly, as the law stands, are police. We really need the courts to change the rights of private auditors. We really need them to be able to really check. Maybe they can be allocated more time to do their checks. They can interview more people. They can do more stuff. Because they just have limited rights, their hands are almost tied. And I think all of this is by design. The luxury brands know that their hands are tied, so they can just turn a blind eye and nothing will happen. They probably never expected for the police to start investigating this, probably because they've been getting away with it for so long, so they just got too used to getting away with it. But there was one thing that really stood out to me in this Valentino investigation. I'm going to read it from my notes. So in the ruling, the Milan judges wrote that despite the previous cases being widely reported, Valentino Bags Lab kept operating with suppliers who exploit workers and use labor in violation of safety regulations without in any way increasing its control systems, which is shocking to me, because you would think that with all the scandals that we've had recently, the whole, all luxury fashion is made in China, which isn't true, but I can understand why people believe that, or the fact that everyone is saying that luxury brands aren't worth it, luxury brands are charging more money, but the quality is going down. All these different factors that is leading to, luxury customers losing customer faith. You would think that brands would be working hard to try and rebuild that relationship. I remember not too long ago, I reacted to a survey done by Vogue Business to luxury consumers on whether they're buying luxury goods. And we're seeing that a lot more consumers are buying less luxury goods and spending more of their money on experiences. They're going on holiday, they're spending money in hotels, they're going to cafes, they're going to fancy restaurants, because they don't believe in whatever luxury brands are selling anymore. You would think they would, use sense and actually understand that we need to protect the reputation by doing right. And ultimately, these luxury brands have themselves to blame, because if they were more transparent with the everyday consumer, this wouldn't be an issue. Someone like me that works in the fashion industry, I've visited multiple factories around the world. I know that there's a multitude of things that can be happening at once. I think a lot of people don't understand the thing that things can be true at once. There can be really amazing factories with great working conditions in the same country where there are these, factories owned by Chinese businessmen using illegal workers and making them work illegal hours. Those two things can be happening at once. People have this either or way of seeing things. Everything's made in China, or if it's not made in China, well, everything is made in these factories that are owned by these Chinese businessmen. People don't like any nuance in any, and I feel like the internet and social media doesn't allow for you to have any nuance in any conversation. And someone like me, because I've worked in the industry for so long, I know that all these things are all true at once, right? But the everyday person, they have day jobs. They have kids to feed, families to feed, bills to pay. We're in basically an economic crisis. People are struggling financially. People don't have time to spend hours like a fashion journalist would, like me, going through all the research and all the statements and all the evidence. So brands have to make it easier for consumers to know where the factories are, to be more transparent on how these things are made, to be more transparent on the checks that they're doing. And until they do that, everything will continue to be lost. Loyalty is going to go down, and soon customers are just going to flock to different brands, to be honest, the more stuff like this comes out. Reuters has some really, really key information around this investigation that happened with Valentino. The Carabinieri police from the Milan Labour Protection Unit inspected 7 Chinese-owned workshops around the financial capital from March to December 2024, including one of the firms involved in the Dior case last year. They identified 67 workers, 9 of whom had no employment contract, 3 were irregular immigrants. Workers were made to sleep in the workplace in order to have the manpower available 24 hours a day, according to the ruling. Electricity consumption mapped by investigators investigators showed seamless day and night production cycles, including during holidays. In addition, safety devices had been removed from the machinery to allow them to operate faster. So let's just pause there before we continue reading on. So it's not safe. They removed safety devices from machines just to allow it to operate faster, which is insane. Like a clear neglect of human life and not caring what happens to these workers from a safety standpoint. The fact that they were sleeping in the factory to make sure they're available to work 24 hours. And they obviously did an investigation in the electricity consumption to see that it tallies with a factory that's working 24/7, essentially. Absolutely insane, but let's read on. One of the Chinese-owned contractors, Bags Milano SRL, had been working exclusively for Valentino Bags Lab since 2018, producing around 4,000 bags per month for between 35 and 75 euros, which is about $39 to $84 each. These same bags retail for between 1,900 and 2,200 euros, according to two judicial sources. The judges said the owner of Bags Milano subcontracted the production of some of the Valentino bags to other Chinese own workshop. According to the ruling, the owner said Valentino Bags Lab did not formally authorize this, but was aware of it and turned a blind eye given how much work there was. That's a very key element, because Valentino were aware that this was going on, but they turned a blind eye because, of course, they're making a lot of money and cash is king, right? So whenever they say in this investigation, as it goes on, we were doing the right checks, we were making sure that we did the right checks. Meanwhile, we have evidence that Valentino turned a blind eye. Take whatever they say with a grain of salt. And of course, the subcontractors and the third-party manufacturers are actually the ones that are on the investigation, not necessarily Valentino itself, because that's how these things work legally. Valentino outsources these things, so they're not culpable legally for what happens in these factories. They can just say, well, we don't operate the factory, so how could we know? And just, act like they don't know what's going on, even though we have evidence that they were aware of what was going on. It's kind of what happened. We saw the same tactics be used in the whole Dior case, which is something that we'll talk about in the next video, because there's been a really big update as far as the Dior story goes. So, in a nutshell, luxury fashion's gilded gates are being smashed into pieces, one investigation at a time. If you want to learn a lot more about these kind of topics around manufacturing and luxury fashion, you can subscribe to my Patreon or my YouTube channel memberships, where I have actually done a fashion book club around the book How Luxury Lost Its Luster by Dana Thomas, which really goes in depth into this topic. So if you're interested, definitely subscribe. And on that note, I would love to know your thoughts down in the comments below.